Hi, I'm just going to make a quick video to give you a little bit of instructions on doing number 8 and number 9 in the homework for chapter 4. So number 8 says the following journal entries were prepared by an employee of international marketing. They don't have adequate knowledge of accounting, and we have 3 entries. And it says assume that office equipment and office supplies were recorded at the correct value, so that has to do with this third entry. So it says examine the above entries carefully and prepare the correcting journal entries. So in the first one, and we're assuming that these were posted from the journal to the ledger, otherwise we would not be preparing correcting entries, we would just mark these out and fix them. But we're going to actually have to correct these. So the first one says accounts payable and fees income. One's debited 14.2 and the other's credited 14.2. So we need to just start looking through here and see if we can figure out what's wrong. So debits equal credits, so that's always a good thing to look for. So that must not be the problem. This explanation says perform services on credit. So if we perform services on credit, we should have earned some fees income, and it should be the it's a revenue account, so it should be credited, and it is. And the debit should be accounts receivable, because when we record services on credit, then we're recording some money that we are going to receive in the future. So at some point we have an account that we're going to receive money for. So accounts payable is money that we owe. That's a liability. We would not owe money for working and providing a service to somebody. They would owe us. So that's the problem with this one. So to fix it, that should be accounts receivable that that should have been recorded. Now up here, accounts payable was debited $14,200. So we know from our conversation with T accounts that when we debit an account and credit an account, those debits and credits offset each other. So for us to get rid of this $14,200 debit to accounts payable, we're going to actually have to credit it for the same amount, and that will offset and just kind of wash out that incorrect amount. So accounts payable, we're going to credit $14,200. We're going to debit accounts receivable $14,200. And let's just make sure we're on the right track. So yours should look something like that. Just kind of to note that fees income that was initially credited, that's correct. So we don't need to touch that. That needs to stay where it's at. We just need to take this amount out of accounts payable by crediting it and turn around and put it into accounts receivable by debiting it. All right, so I'm not going to go through all 3 of these because that's something you need to think through on your own. But I will give you some hints on the analyze portion. So this says, after the correcting journal entries have been posted, what effect do the corrections have on the company's reported assets? So to do that, if I were you, I would go back to the general journal and I would look at the entries that I made. And we're only looking at entries that will affect assets. So here, asset is accounts receivable, accounts payable is a liability, so we can ignore that. Accounts receivable is an asset, and right here, an asset is increasing by $14,200. So that's what we're going to start with. Right now, after entry 1, we have an increase of $14,200. In the next one, we're going to look at the next entry and see what happens to assets, and either add or subtract that change. And then in the third entry, just a hint, the problem here, office equipment and office supplies are correct. But if we were to add those 2 debits together, they don't equal the credit. So the problem with this is that this cash amount's wrong. So when you correct it, you're going to have to fix the amount that you're doing with, that you have recorded the cash at. So the effect as far as assets, office equipment and office supplies, they're right to start with, so we're not going to do anything with those. It's the cash effect for number 3. So the effect on cash is going to be the difference between what we recorded and what should have been recorded. So that's the one that's kind of tricky. But if you have trouble with the analyze, send me an email and I can probably look at yours specifically and give you a little bit more instructions. But I really would like y'all to think through these corrections, but that's an example of the first one. All right, let's look at number 9. It says 4 transactions for automotive maintenance and repair shop took place. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to record the transactions in the general journal and post them to the appropriate ledger accounts. So we're just going to do one of these. So Ryan O'Malley invested $58,000 in cash plus tools with a fair market value of $2,300 to start the business. So each of these, it looks like each of these 4 entries is a compound entry. So in the past, we've had entries with just 1 debit and 1 credit. With a compound entry, we have 3 accounts affected, so we have to have three or more accounts affected. So you have 1 debit and 2 credits, or 2 debits and 1 credit, or you could have 1 debit and 10 credits, or 20 credits, or 200 credits. But you have more than 2 lines in each entry. So we're going to look at the first one. So Ryan O'Malley invested $58,000 in cash. So that should tell me that cash is affected, and cash is going up. So we're going to debit it because assets go up by debiting them. And here it is. So and so he put cash in the business, and he put tools in the business. So we're going to call that tools. Go figure. And it says the tools have a fair market value of $2,300. So now the company has cash plus $2,300 in tools. And what he gets in exchange is capital. So to figure out the capital amount, debits equal credits, we're just going to add those together. So would that be $60,300, I think. All right, so it's going to look like that. For each of these entries, you're going to have to figure out which accounts are affected, the amount that each of accounts affected, and whether they go in the debit column or the credit column. You're always going to want to list your debit accounts first. Having something to look at that tells you what the behavior of a particular account is helpful to me. So for example, having some notes that are going to tell you that to make an asset go up, you debit; to make an asset go down, you credit; to make a liability go up, you credit it; to make a liability go down, you debit it. So having some notes that are going to tell you if it's this type of account, then this is whether you debit or credit, that might be helpful. So once you get finished with the 4 journal entries, the next thing you're going to do is post those journal entries to the ledger. So I would start at the top and just work my way down. So cash, we have a debit of $58,000. So I'm going to go to the ledger accounts. I have a debit. Whoops, I need to return to my question. I have a debit of $58,000. That was on the 1st of the month. And the good news is it's going to calculate that balance for you. So that's the first line, and then I would just go on down. So tools, a debit of $2,300. And that capital, it's also on the first, was a credit of $60,300. Whoops, I mean to do that. So that's all you're going to do. You're just going to do each of those general journal entries. Then I would check my work and make sure that you've got them right before I moved on. And then just work your way down and move them line by line over into the ledger. When you get to the analyze part, what liabilities is a business owe as of November 30th, you're going to go to your ledger accounts and find any accounts here that are liabilities. In other words, they're debts. And whatever account or accounts are debts, they should have a balance, and this is not one, but if they'll have a balance, so the last balance they have is the answer to the analyze question. So hopefully this helps with numbers 8 and 9. If you have any questions, please send me an email, let me know, and I can look at yours specifically and try to point you in the right direction.